Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nantucket Historical Commission meeting of December 15th, 2023, our last one of the year. Thank you for joining. Let me go ahead and take a roll call here. It looks like in the room there, Abby Demolina.
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
George Butterworth.
Here.
Hi. On screen, we've got Mickey Rowland.
Here.
Wait, do we have Rita? Oh,
Yeah, I'm
you
here.
didn't see you in your own individual screen like everyone. Rita Carr, good to have you. And then we've got Mickey and myself. And we've got Holly Backus.
Present.
Hi, and on screen we've got Erin Doherty, I believe, for the Five Surfside, and Mary Bergman in the room. Thank you for joining, Mary. Let's begin with any public comment. I think we only have 2 from the public. No comment? All right, well, let's go ahead and begin with the staff update regarding the demo delay up.
So briefly, there is a proposed demo delay for the planning board to review. I'm going to be notified by planning staff, Billy and Megan, on when they're going to be scheduling the reviews of town proposed changes for the warrant article. So
I can we have a bunch of meetings coming up, so I can give you the list
Okay.
and then we can just, because they put a bunch of them on my calendar the other day.
Oh,
So I'll get that you the list.
I was just told that there's going to be a whole bunch between January and February.
Yeah,
So,
I think they put 3 on, so I'll give you those dates and then we can narrow down from those dates, so at least you
Okay.
have somewhere to start.
thank you. So basically that's in queue. Yes. So that's that, and I'll keep you all posted, and thank you, Abby, for that. It's helpful to have a planning board member on this commission.
I'm only an alternate. but
Yeah,
still.
no,
I can give,
only.
well, I can give you administrative help.
And then one of the things I wanted to provide an update on is, and publicly acknowledge, the Sconset Trust. So the Sconset Trust has, if you're not familiar, a new executive director, Julie Mead, and she's been basically doing an outreach with certain organizations, obviously including the town. They're working on a strategic plan, and I just thought it was great because that obviously emphasizes our public and private partnerships. We have a great one with NPT. Would like to continue a great one with Sconset Trust, obviously NHA and PIN are included in that. But one of the greatest things that I kind of brought up was, it would be nice to be able to, thank them for the work that they've been doing with hiring Marsha Fader and Betsy Tyler on taking those house histories and how can they be utilized with our survey work and how they've been learning to condense those down into the Form Bs. And as you know, you all reviewed and blessed about a dozen of those. So basically how some more information and collaboration can be provided for the public. Obviously, it's more of a internal review on their end that they're working on with a strategic plan, but emphasizing, we would like to have that collaboration be even stronger than it is. So just wanted to let the commission know if you haven't, felt that outreach yet. So.
Thank you, Holly. And Clement was sorry not to be able to make today's
Yes.
meeting. She would have been able to
Yes.
enlighten us even more.
Have we reached out to them formally or?
No, it was, so through you, Mr. Chair, basically, Julie has been just reaching out to, the nonprofits, and I assume to talk to MPT, NHA, want to talk to the town. And basically, not only are they being self-reflective in their own strategic plans and doing their own kind of SWOT analysis, but also how they could help us They're also wanting to not only get an idea of what people out in the public personify of what Sconset Trust is, they're conservation and preservation. They're wanting to get more into preservation. So obviously having a more of a collaboration with us or partnership would help them in that goal. And I mentioned, you drive out to Sconset and like that's their area. Like you know that there's hardly any properties out there that the land bank may own, whereas in town we do. It's like Sconset, that's Sconset Trust, whether it's a open conservation land with their little, square marker like the other conservation areas, or they also have some houses and they're also, involved with preservation. And I also did, just so MPT knows, kind of gave them gave her an idea of looking at what NPT does. For instance, that you just like we have in town, we have a lot of change in property hands, if you will, and some people are great stewards and they want to know the history of their structure. And usually trying to dive into the history of their structure will sometimes even get them to think about preservation restrictions, because they also do hold those, just like NPT. Not as many, but and looking at all the great work that NPT's done over the last 30 years, they could use that as an example.
Cool.
Thank you, Holly.
Marcia Fader, what was the other name?
Oh, Betsy Tyler.
Betsy Tyler.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I put the right names in the notes.
Sure. Well, let's move on to historic tax credits if there aren't any more comments about the trust. Erin, welcome. Please go ahead. Let us know how things are progressing with 5 Surfside.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Erin Doherty with Epsilon. Thank you for your time again here today. We're here again to request a renewed letter of support for the state historic tax credit application for 5 Surfside Road. We were last here in August of this year to request a letter for that August application. Mass Historical Commission has still not issued decisions from that August round. But we are preparing for the next deadline in January, and we expect that MHC will issue those decisions from the August round right around the time of the January filing. So going ahead and submitting that next request. So the project to date has received 2 allocations of state tax credits. As you're probably aware, MHC issues the tax credits in these small allocations, and it's highly competitive. So the project remains eligible for additional credits, so we're continuing to reapply. Construction for the project will likely begin in the spring of next year and then finish in spring of 2025. The proposed scope of work for the buildings is unchanged since we were last before you, but there have been some landscaping and site changes proposed. And we did include that updated site plan with our letter of support request. I think it was included in your packet. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that, but in short, there's a small swimming pool and hot tub that will be installed in the rear yard of the property and some bluestone pavers surrounding the pool. That work was reviewed and approved by the Historic District Commission last month. And as a condition of the approval, the pool is not to be visible from the street. So as part of achieving that, there's some fencing that will be replaced. It's sort of more of an open board fencing now that will be replaced in the same location, but with a flush board fencing so that you can't see through it. There will also be a small enclosure added next to one of the outdoor showers at the property to contain any pool equipment, so that wouldn't be visible either. But otherwise, the scope of work is unchanged, as I said, in terms of the work on the 2 buildings. So the project as a whole is addressing all that deferred maintenance to the property, repairs to siding, roofing, window repairs, and updates to building systems and finishes. So as we've talked about previously, and as I just mentioned, the program is highly competitive, and we appreciate your support in the past. We would look forward to seeing an additional letter of support. And with that update, I'm glad to answer any questions you might have. I see we have the plan pulled up now. If there are any questions on the scope of work, happy to go through that.
Thank you, Erin. Before I open it up to the commissioners, Holly, could you please use your preservation planner hat and tell us what difference this makes as far as a tax credit eligibility? I believe the HDC was split on their vote, but it was a 2-3 in favor.
So for the pool and spas, the HGC is reviewing for its appropriateness from the public way. That's why they always append the not to be seen in perpetuity at the time of inspection in perpetuity. Excuse me. So from that regard, it obviously received its certificate of appropriateness. What I think is important to realize is that historic tax credits are for the historic structure and the historic structure alone. But obviously this is part of their overall project, so it has to be incorporated. I would recommend continuing blessing the historic tax credit for this historic property.
Thank you, Holly. Any commissioners?
I had a question. Are the so for the $505,000 that's eligible for the tax credit, does that include any of the pool expenses and the Bluestone, or?
It does not.
Okay.
It does not.
Okay.
So for the historic tax credits, site work, which this would all fall under, is specifically excluded as a qualified rehab expenditure. So while it's part of the overall project and would be reflected in the overall budget, it's not an eligible expense. So the tax credits wouldn't be going toward the pool specifically.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
Yep.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Mickey, George?
Yeah, I've got it's kind of a comment and a question at the same time, I guess. This, this is, to me, the pool and approving a pool in the backyard of this historic home affects the character of this historic property. And, clearly in somewhat of a negative way in terms of its historical significance, I guess. So I have a hard time with approving a pool in a historic property, and I don't know about the spa, but at least the pool. It's just a glaring diversion from our historical appearances. So I'd like to hear why, is that a relevant comment? I mean, I'm just opening up that subject of how does the pool affect the historical character of this home?
Thank you, Mickey. I see Holly ready to respond. I think she just said that this doesn't. Oh, well, go ahead, Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I totally understand, Mickey, your reservations on it. I think what you have to, separate the two. One is the certificate of appropriateness has been approved by the Historic District Commission. So that's their regulatory authority. I think what's helpful is the fact that the HDC does append those conditions of not to be seen in from the public way forever, because that is where the character and setting would change. Because remember, the purview is from the public way. I think if the HDC did not have that type of caveat to their approvals and we could see it as we drive by, then I think you are changing that character and setting. So put that away. The HDC has blessed it, whether this commission likes it or not. So there's that. From the aspect of the historic tax credit, as the application indicates, as Erin has emphasized and Reed actually, inquired on, I think it's important to note that the historic tax credits is just for the historic structure, not for any other use. And the fact of the matter of I guess looking at it from a holistic approach is the pool is not going to be seen. So therefore, us as a citizen driving by, it's not being altered. Obviously, if you're on the property, you're going to see it, but I just think that caveat that the historic district puts on there assists with allowing people to have these even if they're associated with a historic structure. Now, if this was, as we all know, if this structure was in the core 1955 old historic district, then they wouldn't be allowed to have a pool if it was proposed after the last town meeting. And I think that is something to really understand the difference between the local and old historic districts. That's just my opinion. I really do think that having that caveat on there and that condition in perpetuity assists in not being able to see it and not changing that character setting.
So I understand what you're saying, Holly, and how that relates to the HDC and their specific requirements for approving something that they don't normally want to like, perhaps, or view. I have this feeling, or my feeling is that the tax credits are different than that. They don't have that same distinction of being able to say, well, just because we can't see it, it doesn't exist. You know, this is part of the historic property. And I just feel that I don't know that the MHC cares whether it's visible or not. Of course, I can't speak for the MHC, that's up to them. But you know, as our own historical commission, I care about the property as a whole, whether you see it or not. And it still doesn't feel right to have a swimming pool on the same property as a historic structure. It just seems to degrade from the whole aspect of it. So I hear what you're saying. It's not visible from a public way, but it's certainly visible within the interior of the property, and it's a part of the property. So I still have a problem with it in that regard.
And if I may just add for further context, I appreciate your concern about the sort of overall view of the property and impact of such additions. In the past, MHC and the Park Service have approved pools on other projects in the rear yards like this. They have, you know, not found it to be contrary to their interpretation of the guidelines. You know, I think their thinking is probably that it's, you know, still residential scale in nature, something that is reversible, could be removed in the future without having any detrimental impacts to the buildings themselves. So they're generally less concerned about site changes like these, more concerned about changes to the historic buildings. Now, there could be instances where site changes would have an impact on a historic property, but just as background, they have approved pools on other tax credit projects.
So Aaron, do you know of other situations where they have not approved pools because they were detrimental to the property?
Not that I know of, no.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm with Nikki on this. And I just, you know, all of us who live in the core district, we gave up our right to have pools because they're detrimental to everybody in these small lots, close in town, historic properties, and somehow the stuff on the periphery was allowed out of this. And there's a scramble because you can get a heck of a lot more money on the rental if you jam a pool into the property. Like B. Caton's house up by Caton Circle, they teeny lot, locked up pool right in the backyard, and now their little house for $18,000.
Thank you, George. Abby?
I mean, I kind of see both sides because I mean, honestly, as soon as we were reading this and I was reading it over, I kind of had the same thought of like a pool, not really sounding historic to me. But then I was also like, well, I don't really know the history of pools in general, but then I thought exactly what George brought up, that we kind of have the general of like in the historic district, pools really aren't allowed. But I mean, at the same time, I like if the MHC has blessed it, and I did want to ask Holly a little bit more about the discussion at HDC because I wasn't there, of like, was there a lot of discussion regarding the pool and like how that went, just to kind of understand a little more context on that. But I mean, I do kind of I feel the same way you guys do, of like my instinct was like, not really what I thought, but I understand why obviously people want to put it in. But then I guess that's a question too. Are they intending to rent it out? Which
Well,
Is that the
yeah.
goal?
So on through you, Mr. Chair, twofold. One, the HDC, again, they can sit there and say, I don't like that. But that's not what they're supposed to be doing. Is it
Gotcha.
appropriate or not? End of story. I don't, this whole, I don't like them is not allowed. So.
What's the
there's
difference
not-
between,
What's that?
what's the difference between inappropriate and I don't like it? If you're on the Historic District Commission and you don't like something, you probably don't like it because it's
That's a question. for
not
them, not staff.
appropriate.
Yeah.
But, having this distinction between is it appropriate or not? The fact that they already has set a precedent on approving pools or spas not to be seen at the time of inspection and in perpetuity. So there was this discussion of, if I can remember correctly, because, I go to hundreds of these things. They, I explained to them, this is a historic structure, the applicant, the owner is going through historic tax credits that will be reviewed with the historical commission. It is, not to be seen at the time of inspection. I think I mentioned about the size of the patio, try to make that more, a little smaller. I think there was a discussion about the size, but again, if it's not to be seen, that kind of gets out of their purview. It's an allowable use, in the district, whereas looking at the core, it's not allowable. That was a change at town meeting. Whereas in Nantucket, for instance, that's a VR village residential zoning classification. They're required not only get HGC approval, but also get a special permit. So again, all of that said, it's a little out of reach, in my opinion, to opine for this commission to opine on the appropriateness or not, because right before you is whether or not you're approving or not approving, you're giving your blessing for this applicant to continue going through the historic tax credits process for a historic structure. And I totally see what you're saying, George, about the fact that, well, we gave up our rights and they know. That's also the bringing back down the core aspects of the 255 districts and looking at the history on why in 1955 we decided as a town to have Sconset and Town as historic districts. And then, looking at the history, literally pun intended, of how we became a national and a local district and seeing, well, wait a minute, Tristram's Landing's happening. So in 1771, we, the town, decided through active town meeting to have the entire island as a local district. After the National Park Service already ruled on the entire island to be a National Historic Landmark in 66. I think that's important to understand that at that point, we already had historic structures that meet the definition even before our update in 2012 that were scattered throughout the island. There are 200-year-old structures outside of those two core districts. Yeah. I think that's important to understand, but going through the blessing of historic tax credits is going to, and this commission hopefully encourages them, I would hope, we're gonna see more of that with historic structures outside of the 255 core districts. We should embrace it, because at the end of the day, if it's not a preservation restriction, historic tax credit, because you're required to retain historic character defining features within interior, which the HDC does not purview on, that's the best form of preservation you can have if it doesn't have preservation restriction. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I think that's a good point. Then in that sense, I do support us having the letter. I agree. I guess we're kind of like creeping outside of our zone of influence. And in that sense, I absolutely think it's better for us to be a part of the process and supportive of this than to not even be a part of it at all. And to your point, the historic structure, the more we can do to protect that. So I guess my long-winded answer is I will support writing the letter.
So, Holly, the HTC based or predicated their approval on the MHC approving this too, right? That was part of their decision.
I think so. I don't remember the exact. I don't know if I printed that. There was a discussion
So, Holly, while you're looking for that, what I'm hearing you say is that you're emphasizing that it's not just the core district, but the whole island being a historic landmark district. And so setting, the houses aren't in a vacuum. The setting of these houses is character defining for these. And Abby, one thing that you had mentioned is that Mass Historical approving this. And as far as I know, they haven't reviewed it or given their recommendation for it. So that's still outstanding. Is that what you were saying, Aaron? Their review of this won't be until January?
Correct. So now that we have the Historic District Commission approval in hand, the proposal for the pool will go in with our January application for an additional credit. So we'll have our reapplication for credits, and then this, what we call the amendment to the tax credit application that proposes the pool.
And then when do we expect to hear from MHC? Is that in January once the application is resubmitted?
In terms of their response to the pool?
Yes. Well, and also I think that even the last time that we wrote a letter of support, they hadn't at that point they hadn't reviewed the application.
Yeah, so there's a long lag. So in terms of the January application that will go in with this amendment, we will not hear anything from MHC until April. So no comments on the pool, no comments on whether they're going to get an additional award. So we would submit in January, and then we would hear back in April. In terms of the last application that we submitted, so we submitted an application in August and we won't hear until January. So the 3 tax credit rounds are January, April, and August, and typically MHC is not, at least in recent history, releasing any decisions on those rounds until at or after the next deadline.
Thank you, Aaron.
Mhm.
Yes?
So 2 things. One, I'm looking at the November 14th HDC minutes. And their comments were actually more about the doors on the garage. More than anything, the existing garage. So it was obviously not even on the topic at hand. And then there was a discussion about the existing tulip tree on the property. Again, something not even pertaining to it. So there was no concerns on the pool, and I think it's right there in the minutes. All that is.
But Holly,
Yeah.
didn't they actually say that they'll approve it if the MHC approves it? Wasn't that part of the decision?
If I may, I watched the recording of the meeting and I do remember that I think it was Commissioner Oliver who even said something to the effect of like, oh, it seems odd that a project getting tax credits would put a pool in. But I mean, I personally, like, my knee-jerk reaction to this was, I think, very similar to you, Mickey, and to everyone. I was like, really? Like a pool on a tax credit, property? But I think for other reasons we've discussed, I think the fact that it's reversible and that the tax credit is not, related like to the expense of the pool, I think it's still worth us supporting it.
And on that note, I would definitely recommend, should this commission continue support, putting a caveat in the support letter that you're understanding that there's an intention of having a pool, even though, again, the money that's being requested for the tax credits is for the historic structure, you could put some sort of notation in the letter, if you all wish, and that would be contrary, and then it would also show that this commission is, you're taking a kind of a stance, because this probably won't be the first.
Won't be the last.
Yeah.
Would someone like to make a motion to that effect that we would write a letter of support with the caveat that that, well, you could, whoever's making the motion could give the caveat, but you know, what our feelings are about a pool in this setting on a historic property, and maybe even conditional on the approval or recommendation from Mass Historical. Because I am really curious how this is going to be reviewed by them, and they're probably looking to us locally about what our feelings are. It does seem out of character with a historic structure.
So
So
my question is, what if we vote against the support letter? What are the consequences to this project if we say no?
So sure, so a letter of support from the local historical commission is a required component of each application and reapplication that we make to the MHC. So without the letter of support, MHC would most likely decline to issue an additional allocation of credits for the project.
And what are these credits specifically being applied for? I mean, are we actually saying that they should get tax credits to install a pool? Or is it for something?
I think,
No, we're not.
Mickey, I think that we spoke earlier and that they said that historic tax credit only goes to the historic portion of the property itself and that it wouldn't be in any way related to the pool or any of the landscaping, correct?
Yeah, so if you look at what's in the packet, there's a breakdown of like the total expense of the project, the rehabilitation cost, and then the tax credit, the portion that's eligible for the tax credits, and that does not include that's only certain work on the house, and
Right.
so that's why I would support writing the letter.
So it's a percentage of the cost of the rehabilitation of the building. And there's there's a maximum approvable amount that they're willing to provide funding for relating to the building.
It's up to 20%.
Okay. And they haven't reached that previously, they haven't reached that 20%?
No.
These are the 2 awards, if I may, Mr. Chair, right here on the screen, they've received so far.
so they're eligible for roughly $500,000, and there's been 30 awarded.
Yes.
So it's really just another 20, 25 grand maybe.
But again, and Mr. Chair, if I may, I just wanna make sure that, you know, I completely understand the reservations. But at the end of the day, for the commission not to lose track on what historic tax credits are for. And what it does outside of the regulatory historic district.
Angus, do I make a comment?
Please go ahead, Mary.
Hi, Mary Bergman, Nantucket Preservation Trust. I think I can see why this is hard because I think it's very hard. I feel like I'm emotional talking about it. But it's very hard to separate the issues that are going on in our community from this application. And I think we have to, I would advise you to look at the application and again, to think about it in the context of the building, what's provable. I would also suggest that this commission think about organizing with other commissions on the Cape and Islands and lobbying Preservation Massachusetts to try to get a historic tax credit for individual homeowners. Independent of the project that's in front of you, I think that's something that's challenging. Is to think the property has to be income producing. So it will be a business. There's no way around that. That's the way that that's the way the tax credit is written. So think, is there action that this group could take that would help us to see more tax credit applications that would be more beneficial to the year-round community? So again, I think, you know, how your advice to your preservation planners is to support it. With those caveats, but just to think in the back of your head, how else can we see more applications that might help us get away from some issue.
Yeah, does anybody understand the reasoning behind why they made it only for commercial properties?
I believe if you look at the history of other buildings that are, Nantucket is in a unique position. We don't have. You go out to the western part of the state, it's all the mills that are being restored and turned into condos and apartments and things like that. The other thing I keep it in the back
Yeah,
of
and
my
like
mind
Lowell and stuff.
is the Nantucket Hotel, which does have a pool, did receive historic tax credits. I obviously think the context there is a little, but I just want to acknowledge that I think this is tricky, but also how can we look at this application, how can you look at this application, separate out some of the other things our community's been thinking about.
Well,
I think
that's a good point, Mary, that,
Yeah.
I mean, we've had pools for hundreds of years. It's not that that's just a modern element. But generally they happen on large plots of property that are, down a winding drive behind a house, not right on, a thoroughfare like Surfside Road, on a small lot.
Yeah.
So what's the pleasure of the commission? Would someone like to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we send a letter of support for the 5 Surfside Historic Tax Credit Project, noting our concern about the pool's effect on the property's overall integrity. Is that?
Mhm. And
Okay.
I also think not part of the motion, but we should consider what Mary brought up of like then seeing if we could do some sort of separate effort to work on individual tax credits that aren't dependent on the income.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that was something that the state. I know that I had been talking with Erin Kelly, Preservation Massachusetts, before she left that role, about potentially getting, as other communities are dealing with this issue too. And to think of, instead of, how can this be expanded to tell more people? There's more historic districts now than there were 20 years ago when this was first introduced. And Preservation Massachusetts is a new director now, I think it was just announced a couple days ago, so. Could be something to take on.
That sounds like a good initiative. On Rita's motion do I hear a second?
I'll second.
So on the motion, on the table, Mickey,
I guess I'll go along with it. I'm an aye.
George,
Reluctant aye.
Abby,
Aye.
Rita, on your
Aye.
motion.
Angus, can I put in a note that maybe whoever drafts the letter just circulates it to everyone so we're all comfortable before it goes out?
Thank you.
Sure. Is that okay for us to do outside of the meeting?
It is, if Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind, if you can draft it, send it to me, then I will disperse it to the entire commission, and then everybody individually respond to me directly.
Mhm.
Don't reply.
Don't reply all. Let me know, thumbs up, thumbs down, this is what I want, all that kind of stuff.
And then at the end of that, then you'll send it back to me and I'll send it on.
You got it.
All right. Well, I'm a reluctant aye as well. I'm conflicted because of course we want to support the tax credit system. But I do feel that this is a degradation to the property in general, and I feel like the house and property are one. But I have yet to learn more about the technicalities of that, and this is a learning experience for us all. So with that, we will put together a letter. Erin, thank you for presenting today.
Great. Thank you all for your support and your thoughts on this. And just to Mary's point, any support that can be extended for expanding the historic tax credit for either income producing properties or owner occupied properties would be so welcome. I see every day the challenges of the tax credit program, not only for those income producing properties, in that there's just not enough tax credits to go around, but also I encounter so many very worthy historic properties and projects that just aren't eligible for the tax credits because they are owner occupied. So appreciate any and all support that you all might be willing to extend for the program. And thank you for your time today.
All right. As far as our support for owner-occupied, non-rental tax credits, what's the best next step for that?
I think Mary's suggestion of talking to other, historical commissions is a good place to start, and talking to MHC and Mass Historical, and then, moving on to talking to our legislators from there.
Is anyone interested in being part of a small group to work on outreach in that regard?
I guess I can, I had a couple of contacts when I went to the training in New Bedford that, those might be some good people to reach out to, and I had met a couple of them there, so I'd be happy to just reach out to them and ask and, do that. So if people don't mind, I'm happy to do that.
Mr. Chair, I think that's good, and maybe it's an opportunity for this commission to maybe connect with Preservation Mass and say, congratulations and welcome, and, thank you for, but, here's an opportunity to kind of introduce this concern, for Nantucket at least, and we know we're not the only one.
Okay. Would anyone like to be working with Abby? I don't want her to have too many things that she's having to do on her own.
I would.
Is that you, Rita?
Yes, that was me.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Right.
Well, let's move on if there aren't any other comments on that. So we've got the survey work up next.
And I'm gonna recuse myself from this discussion.
All right. Thanks, Rita. So Holly, do you want to
Sure.
dive into that?
Yes, so our submittal of the RFQ for the fiscal 23 survey work was due on this past Monday. I am sad to report that I don't have any proposals. I received through procurement a notice late Monday afternoon that they received one, but that it was too late. And I'm not sure where it was coming from, because it was out of state, not in the region, I should say. So I don't know who it was from. I don't know how, unless they were just looking at our procurement page on how they would be notified on that. I am waiting also for direction. I'm waiting for from MHC. I'm also waiting for specifics from PAL on why they have not submitted a proposal when they were interested. So I think there's a few things that if Erin was still here, she'd probably allude to this, that I know Epsilon and PAL are both trying to get more staff that are architectural historians. I see the listserv requests for, hey, so I know staffing is of concern, and it's been a concern for these type of organizations. I can completely understand that, especially working for a municipality where we're always trying to look for staff as well that are professionally qualified for meet certain criteria. So with that, again, I'm kind of in limbo at the moment on where we go from here. However, I did want the commission to take a look at what we have in the packet as far as the list, and thank you for putting that in the packet for the next list of survey work. So let me get to that. If you all have not already individually, so this was in the RFQ that went out as our recommended list. Based on the award that we received from MHC for the grant, they had said that that was about 140 surveys. That's pretty much what they've been going by. So this is only, the list is only 130. There may be ones on here that we dive into that we say, well, wait a minute, that structure is completely gone, it's been demolished, it was never, documented as such, take that off the list. And again, as I discussed before, that'll be something to put over here for me to get to some point, to officially codify and, give them a continuation sheet to say it's no longer there. And that will update and turn their macros citing where they'll indicate if it's demolished or not. So again, this is gonna, go through that kind of process. This is mostly finishing the Brant Point area, other part of Easton, other part of Hulbert, down to Jefferson and the actual point itself, in Mickey's neighborhood, down there. So, yeah, and you'll also notice in the packet, at the end of this, we're getting into a cliff, North Beach, and then specifically here that, obviously other areas within the Cliff North and Waterfront North neighborhood. I do remember, Mickey brought up about, kind of expanding out. That's why that is kind of left a little loose. One thing that's been very helpful is our survey plan, where it allows us to have that flexibility because all of these areas are high priority. And that's what the biggest crux of these grants is to do these surveys for high priority areas that have been outlined in our survey plan.
So the additional, what I'm hearing is that there are 130 that are listed, of the possible 140 that could be surveyed in this particular round. And of those 130 that are listed, there might be some that are discovered that they are new and not a high priority or eligible. So we're going to need at least 10 more, if not more than that, from this area, or including Cliff North and Waterfront North, which is everything along the water north of Main Street or Straight Wharf. Is that correct?
Yes, so for instance, that would be where the yacht club, the Nantucket Yacht Club is. That would be our Harborfront.
But even like the north side of Main Street, like Thomas Macy Warehouse and
I
north.
have to refer to the plan.
Okay.
Delineations on that. But again, the survey plan, not only visually does it outline it, but it also categories it that way. So it'll indicate those areas.
And would like Old North Wharf, which is north of Main Street, would that be considered a group, or each one of those would have to be individually?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, that's up for, this commission to decide. Does it qualify to have an area form, Form A, like we did for the Folger?
Wow.
Okay, yeah. On Orange Street, when we did the fish lots. That was an area form, but each individual house unit within the townhouse received, substantial history. So. There, some different room, that's up for interpretation on how we want to handle it. I mean, it's just how we, said when we get to, say, the Underhill cottages out in Wisconsin. Some of those received surveys back in the 80 effort. Do we want to do an area form? It would probably benefit of having its own area form in addition to, my opinion, those individual surveys. Some of those I think are going to be unique in that regard. Does that area in particular that we're looking at here, does that on the wharf constitute? It might not. So.
Commissioners, what do you think?
I think that certainly the waterfront cottages along North Wharf have a sort of a communal feeling to them. I'm not sure about the ones across the street, although they're similar. They just don't have that public visibility that the waterfront ones do.
Mhm.
So I think that it does make sense to have these combined in an area review, whatever that's called.
Yeah, the area Form A, it's in addition though, right?
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
So, that's one of the things that the survey plan kind of outlines, but I think, the commission can take and opine on it a little bit more when it comes to these individual structures, and I use the Underhill houses as an example, because those are so unique in their own regard, but then collectively, they address the area itself. So that was one thing that I had mentioned when we were going through the survey plan, creating that with Pal. I really feel strongly that this area, but for the most part, typically, in case of the one on Orange Street, you normally just do an area form and that would handle them all. So there are going to be some areas where we decide, that would also benefit from an area form as well. And you might find that with the wharf. I mean, look at the history of the wharf in general. There's some contemporary that are there. There's stuff that's mid-century that's contributing, and then there's stuff that's been there since, like the Thomas Macy warehouse is a prime example, built after the Great Fire. So, I think we're gonna have to take it on a case by case, but what I guess is important to know is this list was based on the geographic area, finishing up the Brant Point area, but also and diving into some of the outskirts areas that we had to create. But also, anything that had a macro survey, because in addition to being a high priority area, one of the largest recommendations is to get to these older surveys and verify whether or not is that the same exact structure that was there in '89 when the survey was done. Do we need to nix it completely and say, yeah, it's completely gone? And again, that would be put over on this side and we'll handle it that way. And we're not going to include that within the amount. Hope that's clear.
The cottages at the end of the wharf were all destroyed in '91 in the no-name storm. Those are rebuilt, but the ones that are actually on the water on stilts, I think all of them got wiped out in that storm. But the ones that are on solid ground,
Yeah.
all around the Wharf Ride Club and all that, those are original.
And even in an area form, that would be important to notate, just giving that description so people realize there is a difference between the two. These were built, these are contemporary, these are. Yeah. That's helpful. But again, we're I would highly recommend if you all haven't done it individually, just take a look at this list. If there are ones that you think, no, I think that, I personally know that this structure here is listed, but it's not there anymore. Perfect. Scratch that off, tell me, let me know. Because this is obviously a team effort. But then again, at the end of the day, I still need direction on where this project goes from here. I'll probably have to redo the RFQ, the assistance of procurement and MUC, and go through that round again. So that's it.
What about other commissioners? Opinions about other properties that could get added to this list, and about the wharves, whether area or individual. I guess that really is area on top of individual, but I just think about the wharves being, constructed and there's stuff built on, north and south legs of them, kind of all at once. And it would be interesting to learn, how that happened on the wharves. But Rita or Abby?
I mean, I think I agree with you. I think it would be interesting to learn about it. I think I also agree with like Mickey's sentiment that like it does have a communal feel. So I think it might be helpful to have both, but I think to Holly's point, we'll kind of have to do it on a case by case basis to make sure if we do like a group that does it also necessitate like a separate one but I do think the idea, especially like if you're saying they're all constructed at once, like having that kind of group feel, I think is really important.
A case in point with the townhouses on Orange Street, they were all built pretty much in the 1830s, all at once by the same person. So, that makes sense to have one, but they're all individually done. The area forms are, and that also constituted as a form. on our numbers system. So if we do that, you know, that will also dig up the amount, because that's another thing, understanding that these grants, it all comes down to numbers and money. You know, and I think one of the issues is also getting lost, and maybe, you know, one of the hardest reasons of getting people to move forward with it is the Nantucket.
Yeah,
So, you know, is this something that MHC can say, you know what, we opined on it and said originally, you know, this $40,000 project is 140 surveys. You know, now we acknowledge that actually it takes a little bit more time, money, and effort. We're gonna tweak that, and that's might be a conversation that I'm gonna have. But
Exactly.
that you all know,
We can pare this down, but we can't add to it once we go into the process. So we want to go in with a bigger number than we actually think we're going to have done, right?
yeah.
Yeah. This aspect you can join for, right? We're
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, I mean, I think the list looks pretty comprehensive as it is right now, but thinking about the words, like compared to the folder block on Orange Street, I think there is more, you know, there's just more variety.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it would make sense to have individual Form Bs for each building there. They're obviously, you know, speaking to one another within that context of the wharf, but
right.
So, Holly, when you said that the Form A still has individual Form Bs within it, it's just an extra one, sort of an overall about the whole thing, comprehensive list? Is that
Yeah, I mean,
It can
basically,
be.
it counts as, actually, I take that back. I want to say when we did the Form A for the folder block, it actually counted for 4 or 5, how many are there? 4 or 5 individuals? 5? So I want to say it actually counted for 5 forms, but wrapped up in one. So,
right?
you know, I mean, we could, and that would be a conversation we could have with the consultant on, you know, we have concerns on how the works are done. We know that some are contributing, you know, others that were rebuilt after the no-name storm, that 91?
91,
Because Bob was 92. Yeah.
October 30th, 1991. I remember well, I was fleeing my house back then. The basement got flooded.
Yeah, I remember walking outside, and I was gonna fly away, as a kid. I just think that that's important to kind of, you know, leave that out there in the universe, if you will, and say, you know, we acknowledge, I mean, because if you look at our wharves in general, they essentially, it's our harbor, it's our waterfront, that's an area in itself. But if you get down to the nitty gritty on separating the difference between Steamboat Wharf and Commercial Wharf and Old North Wharf and Old South Wharf, they're all individually unique too. So again, I think we're relying on our, you know, consultant to assist us with that on a case by case basis would be helpful. But obviously having this commission to decide on where specifically on which wharf, what you'd like to see. Because I do think if you understand that these are historic, but these ones on the other end were reconstructed or rebuilt, they still have the retaining the character and setting of that wharf. So they work together as a whole, and I think that's the most important part to understand. Is you know, our infill architecture that's been built after our period of significance has been approved. Because essentially it was voted on that it would, you know, at the end of the day, those structures meet the character and setting of the overall district. I don't know, I bet there's people that would love to do case studies on Nantucket.
Well,
Just how unique it is in that regard.
Too bad they're not doing our RFQ then.
it seems like there's a lot to discuss here, but I'm feeling like we need to add to this list so that we can give some away without you know, not having a full list. So what do you think about, I mean, are there, Holly, I had mentioned about adding Easy Street, the old
Yes,
train depot.
yep.
But what do you all think about like adding North Wharf to that? If it's in that waterfront north, I think waterfront north is from Main Street North, but I'm not positive.
I think.
You know, it seems like a natural extension of both Easy Street and the
Mhm.
Point area. I
Yeah.
think this
Yep.
fits right into it. So I would
Yeah.
definitely try to include as much there as we can. And regarding the Forms A and B, I would not want to like detract from, like, if we did a Form A, I wouldn't want to lose the individual review
Yeah.
of the buildings on North Wharf, but make sure they're done individually, including a Form A.
Right.
Agreed.
And then what about, I don't know, with all of that, I mean, how many structures are on North Wharf? Are there a dozen? So, that might just bump us up past the 140. But there might be half a dozen of those that are no longer historic, and that might bump us down to, 135 or 136. So, what about like Thomas Macy Warehouse or any other develops along the north side of Main Street? Does it make sense to put those on the list just as structures that if we, end up with having extra possibilities, we'll have something to fill the holes?
Sure. I mean, they're part of, I mean, still docked behind North Wharf and then right over to Main Street. And then the backstop to that is the A&P parking lot. So, I mean, it's kind of a packaged area.
Can we include those in the list, Holly? And then that way we can peel away what we need to, but we'll still have a full list.
Yes, I will verify as long as they're in the waterfront north, which I believe they are. I can add that to this Excel spreadsheet.
Great.
There already is a Form B for Thomas Macy Warehouse, though,
Yes.
because it has a
Restriction on it. And then there's a couple of Form Bs that were done the last 20 years, I think, for a couple on the North Fork that NPT did. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, there's two.
Yeah. that are shown.
So will you update the list and then?
Yes, I will update the list, but I think, that is obviously a priority for me, for you guys to get that going. But my biggest priority for this fiscal 23 project is.
To get
we're
somebody to
going
do
for
it.
that. Yeah, I'm just. But again, I think it's gonna have a conversation with MHC and see where we can go on there.
Yeah, I was going to ask Holly, is there a way for us to, I mean, have we bottlenecked this so tight that there's no one applying? Is there a way to open this up a little bit more in order to get more applicants?
Probably is. I think it's gonna take a brainstorming with MHC and obviously procurement. I mean, I have to appease both. MHC is very prescriptive. They have to be because this is money from Congress. And then obviously our local procurement laws. I'll get an answer. It might not be before the end of the year, but I'll get an answer.
Thanks, Holly.
Yep.
Okay, what about CPC submitted projects? Any updates?
Yes, so, they had an initial review. Where I and myself and Penn, so Clary Larkin from Preservation Institute and University of Florida and Emily Mullen were both there to answer any questions. They blessed unanimously the West Monomoy project. And then there was a one opposition to the Main Street. Since those meetings in October, I think it was, they've had their subsequent meetings there. I guess they're fleshing things out, specifics. They did have a meeting, I know yesterday, I did not attend. But there is still kind of a concern with the Main Street project about, where does a municipality's responsibility start and where is it just preservation? And I'm trying to, you know, make sure that even on the town side, because Capcom is opining on the request for the town's responsibility, on what the difference of the two is. So needless to say, I will be probably at Capcom next week, because I don't know if everybody's familiar. Capcom is the advisory board for FinCom and for select board. So basically, I was under the impression that they were being blessed to the next step. I'm not 100% sure at the moment, but I think they are. There's just a lot of nitty-gritties that they are all having to figure out before it gets to the one. So
the one dissenting thing with Main Street is gonna get in the way of it moving forward or not?
I don't really know.
Okay,
I don't know.
let's hope that doesn't
Yeah,
prevent it from moving forward. It's such an important initiative. All right.
it sure is.
Okay, well,
I'll give an update next month when I have more information.
okay, any other comments from the commission? Hearing none, let's move on to the Nantucket Offshore Wind Community Fund. So the application deadline is the end of next month. Any news or thoughts about that?
I had a thought. I know at our previous meeting, we talked about maybe doing a video of, you know, visual examples of building with Nantucket in mind. And I was thinking maybe specifically we could create a video that illustrates our solar guidelines and examples of, you know, properties there across the island, but maybe focusing specifically on you know, properties within the core historic district that have solar that, you know, meets our guidelines. And that would be something, you know, I was thinking it would be pretty brief, just for, you know, posting on the town's website and YouTube maybe, or social media, that it'd just be a good reference point, and, you know, something we could work obviously with the HCC together to make that clear. So that's something I would propose.
I think it's a good idea.
Rita, Abby, I think you brought that up last meeting, and I think that's what does everyone think about that? Would that be that's not at the exclusion of HDC and sort of looking at what the guidelines are in favor of versus you know what they aren't.
Yeah, I was just thinking
Just
like,
be a focus.
yeah,
Like
because all of-
educational, like a quick
Right.
highlight.
So because all of building with Nantucket in mind is obviously so much broader, I thought this would be maybe a good starting point.
I think it's timely, the topic. And I think it's a good idea, and it might be a good place for us to start. And then especially what we could do, Angus, if we see how effective, like if people are responding to it, then we could come up with like an idea of doing a series, and then we focus different things based on what people respond to.
Yeah, and I was also thinking that because of the community impact areas as they're defined within the grant application, this is hitting to support and promote renewable energy development, to combat the effects of climate change, and to protect, restore, and preserve, you know, cultural resources. So
Checks a lot of boxes there.
Yeah.
It does, and on that note, just, and that's kind of one of the things that I've been really wanting to emphasize, is that this funding, this grant process, you know, the fact that I don't want people outside of preservation to lose thought or track on why we have the money to begin with. Because you know, our National Historic Landmark status, and going through the Section 106 review process and 110F. But more importantly, that it wasn't to just, you know, pay the town or pay MPT and you know, and go into your general funds. This is a community grant. So there's pockets of money that are for MPT, there's pockets of money for the town, and there's pockets of money for the community. What this commission sits here as this would be something that would, actually, I would be taking this proposal and providing it to the town sustainability work group. Sustainability work group is run pretty much by our sustainability manager, Vince Murphy, as well as Lauren Sinatra as our energy coordinator, who's obviously involved with the offshore winds community fund process, would be vetting these on behalf of the town. So essentially, this commission's proposal under this grant would actually have to be signed by the town manager. And so with a deadline of January 31st, I think I just got a notice from Vince today that we are meeting a week or so before that. So essentially, I would need something from the commission, obviously sooner rather than later, like everything else. Yeah, so I think we are meeting on the 19th in the afternoon after our regular meeting, NHC's meeting. It might actually be that Thursday, the day before, I think it's 18th. So basically right around the same time. So it would be before we meet again. On that note, you know, any volunteers to assist on the application, we all have it in our packet. I can obviously help as well, but I really do, Rita, to your point, I think this is a fantastic job of coming up with an idea that hits those target requirements within the grant, as well as it addresses one of this commission's goals on helping with building a Nantucket mine and getting that information out there. On another note, associated with this grant, which I think this commission would be happy to hear, that, you know, Lauren and I, as colleagues, have discussed with this grant in mind what the town could look for. And we've discussed that looking at some town-owned historic resources that would benefit of having solar. That would benefit of having some type of renewable or mini splits or something like that. That obviously we know there's a process established already with HTC. We already know, but here's a historic resource that's town-owned. It hit multiple boxes. And I have, of course, the running list out of our survey plan. But I note that the Landmark House, which is one that she is currently working with, to provide some sort of renewables there, is not on our survey list. So if you guys see anything in the survey plan, side note, let me know that we need to just, it's a living, breathing document, you know, I'll say that as a planner. So I have actually added it in there. But yeah, there's all sorts of different things that we can do, but encouraging something that kind of hits more than one box, I think is a good idea.
Well, it sounds like something we want to do. What do the other commissioners feel about it?
I agree. I think it's a great idea.
Mickey, George?
I'm in.
Yep.
So what is the next step? Obviously that we have that looming deadline, and we need to move forward with it. Is it just a matter of putting in the application? Is that the next step?
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to take the lead on, you know, I was thinking I would reach out to NCTV to get a quote from them to see if they would, you know, what it might cost to produce something like this. And then work on the grant application that I could, you know, sort of similar to the tax credit letter, you know, circulate, like have Holly circulate, and then we could get comments back so that it's ready for that January meeting.
Do you want me to, I'm on crack because I'm on planning. So the reason why is, do you want me to like maybe ask them if like there's anything specific they would like recommend that we include
Oh,
in our little like
from a
proposal?
resiliency perspective?
Yeah, because then we could, if we could hit the resiliency piece, then we would hit all four.
The only thing on that is they're more on the coastal resiliency side, and I know that they are also like benefits to
Yeah,
get
so they
this as
might,
well, so I think that's a.
Okay.
But if they, you know, if the topic of this grant comes up when you guys have a meeting, I would definitely mention that the historical commission is looking at doing one that would hit not just preservation, but resiliency.
Yeah, well, maybe it can be part of, Mary, that kind of discussion that we've talked about before of like, maybe we start with the solar, but then we could say something that we go to next would be
Oh, yeah.
resiliency, so we can kind of tee it up as that, if you guys think
I
that
mean,
makes sense.
you know, and not that the grant requires you to hit every single category. We could request one just for preservation. But I think
No,
for me, I always think the town, we're a branch of the town, should lead by example.
yeah,
And if we're leading by example, that means let's have a project that hits both resiliency and preservation. And what a good thing to do is the solar with building with Nantucket in mind. But on the topic of building with Nantucket in mind, you know, this could be I guess a catalyst to help us to move forward with doing more videos of building with Nantucket in mind. I know Mick and I have talked about, and I think Angus too, about the missed opportunities that people don't really see with the building with Nantucket in mind. Dormers, for example, and their requirements in the you know, off the ridge and 3 feet off the sides, and just the glazing, I think, is another one that is being a newer kind of a concern that I at least see. So taking these aspects of building with Nantucket in mind that are they're still good requirements and recommendations to have, but you know, emphasize it, get it out there more. So maybe this will be a jumping point for that.
yeah.
Just an idea.
What's the glazing issue?
Having
Much of it.
yes, too much glass on a wall plane. I think it's
Like
30.
the row of 4 French doors instead of individually separated windows. You know, the amount of glazing that's happening these days, it's getting to be more and more commercial feeling. Rita, thank you so much for offering to do that, and that would be much appreciated. How does everyone stand? Does that?
Yeah, I've got
Yeah.
a question regarding the format of this project. You know, we're talking about a video, which sounds nice. I'm not really clear how that eventually becomes accessible. I guess like YouTube makes sense. But does a PowerPoint type presentation also make sense? And because it might be easier to kind of review on your computer, it might just be a little bit more accessible.
Oh, yeah, so it could be a combination of a short video and then also like some sort of, you know, PowerPoint, or, you know, that would be turned into a PDF and posted online. That would just,
Yeah,
instead of the video, have, you know, still pictures of the
Well,
examples.
we could do both. I think the thought is the video would live on the website, correct? Like the town site, but I
Right.
think to your point, we should have a like
A
document to
static, yeah.
accompany it.
Yeah, I guess
I
that's
think the combo is a good idea, Mickey, because people have different ways of absorbing information, and some it's a lot easier for them to watch a video, and others it's easier to look at documents on the screen. So having both will get both. How's that sound, Rita?
That sounds great.
Cool.
And then, I don't know, Holly, would you be able to fill the HTC in that, you know, we're sort of
Yes.
proposing this, or,
Yes.
I mean, I could attend a meeting also, but,
Yes,
okay.
yeah, that's on my list. Yes.
Okay. Well, next up is the NAPC review. I actually wrote to 3 of the people, and one of my emails got kicked back, but I haven't heard from anybody just about getting our thoughts out there to them for their review. So Holly, you want to give us an update on where they are and what to expect?
Yes, so their contract to provide their recommendations to the town through the select board and the HDC with a joint meeting. That's actually been extended due to the fact that December is December. And it's holidays, so that was extended to the end of January. So we're in the process of picking out a date. That's basically a select board meeting, but that will also become a joint HDC meeting. And as of this week, it sounds like it's going to be pushed into February. Just because of timing, you also gotta remember that select board is going through meeting warrant article stuff, budget stuff, so their schedule is getting really tight. And I know the chair of the select board wanted to be in attendance, and that was also one of the things of why it would be pushed out. So, but I want to just backtrack a little bit, because I think the involvement of other folks, including this commission, is not necessarily how I was thinking it was going to be. And looking at what the actual contract was, is what they're following. So I just wanted to mention that, because I know before, I had mentioned that there was going to be interviews and all this kind of stuff outside of the commission, outside of staff. But they're following their scope. That again was drafted by the HGC, blessed by select board to a T. So, maybe there'll be room at the end to expand upon that. For instance, you all had your own SWOT analysis that was done. I haven't seen that yet. The results are, but obviously that would be nice for this commission to know, because quite frankly, when I was before the select board and getting them to bless NAPC, the leaders in the country for this type of stuff, I was thinking it would be more of a very holistic review, obviously hitting the issues that have been going on with the HTC, but a holistic approach looking at the historic district, which includes obviously this commission and being a CLG. And I know that us being a CLG has not been lost, I guess is a good word, with the NAPC folks. They're the ones who actually recommended us to be a CLG way back when as well. So, and they were happy that we were going through that process when we had the camp training, you guys remember in 2020 during COVID. So, I guess to say, I'm glad you sent your thoughts to them. I am waiting, to see what the next steps are as far as their recommendations. We're kind of nitpicking all down to when they're going to have this presentation, but essentially it's going to be a joint meeting between the select board and the HGC at one of the select board meetings probably in February. And I actually, you guys know a little bit more than the HGC does, so just the nature of it. That's where we stand.
Thanks, Holly. Any comments from the commissioners? Seeing a head nodding. All right. All right. So next thing up is the MP and EDC membership discussion. They're in anticipation of the bill the article that is going through from town meeting, continues to sort of work its way through the system. But in anticipation of that, the MPD and DC has looked at restructuring, and as far as I know, it's not including any preservation input, which in a community such as ours, Nantucket, and our economy being built on our history and our preservation, that is a real concern. So I appreciate any comments from the commissioners.
I could just comment because I wasn't on the meeting, but I know that I think the thought isn't that they don't want to include preservation, but rather that they wanted to look to staff, because my understanding is they did an assessment and looked at the other regional planning agencies. And I know in one of our previous meetings, we had talked about this, if we had asked And when we look at the other communities, the way that they're structured with how they form their regional planning agencies is that they have a really integral relationship with their staff, and it's very robust. And I'm thinking about like the Cape Cod Commission, Martha's Vineyard. So it's not that there's not representation, but more that the staff member would be the active kind of voice for that. So that was just my understanding of how they wanted to include historic preservation. I don't know, Holly, if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. That and the fact that there's other type of functionality within the town. For instance, I mentioned Lauren, she's our energy coordinator, so if the NPDC has any energy related, solar related, what have you, concerns, they reach out to her. And she would obviously attend. And then, because again, we all, as town employees through Plus, work for NPDC. As well as same with Mike Burns, and is a little bit different as transportation, but it's kind of the same concept, that there's not one of those type of experienced people on the commission. They refer to staff, and that's kind of what their thought process is of including preservation. And not to nix the concept of having somebody from the historical commission on the NPDC, but I think it's appropriate to look at the fact that there are other communities that don't do that. Essentially, I think if there was any type of concern that the NPDC would have from a preservation perspective, not only can they go to staff, but they can go to the CLG, which is including this commission and the HTC. So I don't want you all to lose sight on that. I think that's important because in retrospect, if you are comparing us to other communities, a lot of communities aren't CLGs. And that's the whole basis of the certified local government program with the National Park Service, is incorporating preservation at its highest level in regionally. So, I think you guys kind of all know where I really stand on it. I get the intention, but at the same time, the historically unintended. I've been the voice for preservation for the NPDC, whether it's through what the CLG is doing, or what HGC is doing, or this commission is doing, or even from a National Historic Preservation Act representation with Section 106.
Well, Holly, your input is invaluable, and I'm glad that you're part of the process. I wish you were a voting member, or there was some other one voting with the same background and involvement. Any other comments from the commissioners?
I guess I'm wondering, is this related to the article that was approved at the town meeting, or is this a separate issue?
I think they're separately having discussions because they were planning prior to last year's town meeting, there was another article the year before, and so they started having the discussion. So I think there's kind of like a holistic effort for them to look at the commission separate from the like I think the article is addressing some stuff, but I think they're doing like a bunch of things, including some of the things in the article. That was my understanding as well.
Yes, I believe so. Mr. Chair, through you, if you really look at it, what was it, Article, I think 81 in annual town meeting 2022. And from that point, the NPDC has been self-reflective, looking at how they can, do what they need to do better, what have you. And then you look at the last article that was passed, by one vote, it kind of undermines really and truly what they were doing. So I guess that's why they've been talking about it. And I would assume that's why we have this on our agenda today.
Yeah.
So they're looking for representation, broader representation, not necessarily as voting members, but just as part of at-large group? Is that what we're talking about?
No, I think their discussions are about broadening the membership,
Mhm.
but increasing the number of people,
Okay,
yeah, on the committee. And I know I watched the most recent meeting and I was surprised, sort of, it seemed like at the start when all of the current members had sort of given their list of like who they thought the representation should be, there was pretty wide support for the idea of having a representative from the sort of, they were calling it like the historic preservation sector, which
Mhm.
could be someone from the NHC or the HCC or just anyone who would, you know, put their hat in the ring who could represent that interest. And then it got kind of, you know, picked away by the end. And I do think, I mean, I think historic preservation is important to, you know, Nantucket's economy. I think obviously everyone on this meeting would agree with that. And while I do think Holly can, you know, you obviously represent that interest in a fantastic way, but I think having a voting member would, I mean,
We
would be
could
ideal,
always,
but obviously it's there.
I mean, I think that probably the issues, there's just not that many spots, but I mean, they're gonna be at large spots. We could always just support someone from historic preservation running for an at-large seat and then having that voice anyway,
Yeah, and I know, I
right?
think Christy Farentella is stepping down.
Yeah.
and-
Because her new role.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's an opportunity, is there's always gonna be at-large seats, so if we maybe are just like organized about it, we could ensure there's some voice there.
well, I like the notion of having a committed member from, you know, whether it's Holly or from, you know, just a citizen with these specific interests in mind. You know, Holly's a good representation, but if Holly, would your role be as just advisory, or would it be voting?
No, so as it stands right now, I'm advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah, as staff.
So I think having a voting member is really what we would be looking for, I would think.
Right, but I think that that's where we're saying if we want a voting member, we'd probably have to support someone running at large.
Right.
As
Yes,
it's.
as a
Right.
fallback, but we can advocate to have a voting member.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are advocating for it, but I think, as Rita pointed out, I don't think currently that's the way it looks like it's gonna end up.
Right. Okay.
Angus,
Mary,
let me comment. Hi, Mary Bergman, Nantucket Preservation Trust. As I'm listening, it occurs to me, like, my biggest concern is that the economic development part of that, that the linkage between preservation and the economics of the island is being missed, and I think, so what could this committee do? With public outreach, with work with real estate agents to again kind of hammer home that connection of Nantucket has been a success because of its historic preservation attributes. And just as an aside, I think it's been really nice to hear this committee discuss ways in which you might be able to involve yourself in the community and take a leadership role in things that other commissions and boards are not doing. And I think that's really good.
I think that's the hope, is that that organization would recognize the importance of preservation and devoting a seat to it, not just someone who has that in their background, who's just like, you know, one of the at-large voted in members, but a dedicated seat to someone with preservation interests. We're not short of anyone looking for, you know, commerce and, you know, economic development and all of that. And you make a very good point, Mary, about that having been linked for a very long time to preservation. But it seems like it's less and less of that. more of everything else. So, you know, we're talking about long-range planning for the island, and we really don't want to lose sight of that. And we don't want it to be like a lucky seat that someone, gets voted into. But it's good to hear everybody's comments on it. If there aren't any other further comments on it, we can go on to our goals. We were just about out of time and we were going over this last time, and
Yeah,
breeze through it. So maybe we can just start at the top and work our way down so that we just affirm what our goals are and where we are with them, what we're doing. Abby, since you've created this,
yes, I can lead the discussion. So the first one, we were talking about the survey plan. I think we already talked about this. We had mentioned in November, like we had just completed the applying for fiscal year 24.
Yeah.
I think we just had the discussion that our next update will be is once we know what's happening with the RFQ for fiscal year 23, that will be kind of where we're focusing.
Yeah, I
Correct.
should find out within the week or two, before the end of the year, whether or not we're being accepted to the next round.
So do we have a new key date for that?
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to put the key date as.
I don't know, I'm waiting for the mail, so.
Well, I mean, because our next meeting isn't until January.
January 19th, so you could put that on there, I should know by then.
Okay, so I'll just put as a note that we'll know by.
And you could, include it, so it's for both, update on F 23 and 24.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say Holly to update on fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. Okay. We're waiting for comments. Like, I don't think we have any update on CPC. It sounds like that's just kind of slow going for these next two because.
It's probably gonna be slow for a while, because I think they're gonna be meeting in January next.
All right, so maybe I'll put the date as. Should I put February to see when we'll know anything, or
Yeah.
I'll put February?
So
It's
that
just-
second line item for CPC grant, for the sub grant for historic preservation, that was rooted in assisting people with structures that were that they couldn't afford to maintain certain elements of their historic structures. And there would be like a revolving fund for that.
Mhm.
And that was started by Hillary, and then David and Georgia worked on that. And then it was David and Georgia. And then I think Abby, you joined in, and David off, and then Georgia peeled off. And then it was you, Abby. And at some point it switched to this sub-grant thing for a position, like for somebody to manage this fund. And I don't believe the commission ever really discussed that transition. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about
Well, yeah, no, I think that's a mischaracterization. We needed to have a consultant to help us figure out how we could create the revolving fund. Because the biggest thing that what we found through all the research with Georgia, David and I, was that like we really needed to find out what the mechanism is, and we need like a consultant to help us. So that role would be the consultant helping us if we were to set up a program, what it would be for a revolving fund. But I think as it stands, I don't think it'll be funded by the CPC, so we'll probably just have to go back next year. But that was really the goal, was just to get like someone to help us set it up.
Mhm.
Is that necessary, or is there someone in-house that could assist in that without going to the CPC for?
Well, we were told there was no staff that could help us do it. Like, I think because my understanding is the staff, like, we don't have the staff today from the town to do that. That was my understanding, unless I'm incorrect.
No, yeah, there's.
I think we wish there was someone to do that, but there's not at our town level.
I would recommend, I guess maybe taking this off as a CPC grant
Mhm.
for a local fund and changing the goal to obviously still somehow figure out how this sub-grant project could work. But to your point, I mean, looking at the Paul Braun grant at the federal level, it needed some sort of matching grant. And in Massachusetts, it's typically CPC for those things. But those are usually from a site, what makes this a little different and unique is the fact that it's for a actual revolving grant. It's to help those folks, like what Aaron was saying, who are trying to get historic tax credits, who are owner occupied, same concept, but it's unfortunately very difficult, which I'm assuming you own a historic house. I mean, it's the same thing. It's like we're trying to come up with some way of making it so the average person who owns a contributing structure on Nantucket can dip into these funds. And what's being the hardest part is starting it.
Well, so maybe is it better, like, maybe should we shift away from the idea of our revolving fund and instead try and focus more, like, just noting that it would be very complicated and it would involve trying to find this,
Well,
money to
no one
hire a
was gonna give us
consultant.
the money anyway.
Right,
That's-
so maybe we should say, our goal is to create a source of funding for people who want to, update and for the maintenance and of historic properties for people who might not, have the financial capacity to do so just with their own pocket. And so maybe instead of looking at a sub-grant program, we look to how can we make, forward the goal of having the historic tax credit program available for owner occupied properties. Would that be a more effective use of our
I think
commission?
that's more to the point. But how
Power.
can we move that forward?
That one in particular would be, like I recommended, reaching out to Preservation Mass, new executive director, who we all know are also involved with the overall preservation action, which
Yep.
I believe Mary also
Is
is
on the board.
even on the board. So there's that. I mean, which is fantastic, is preservation action.
Just rolling around out in your lawn. I just picked it up.
Okay.
You
thank
just leave, yeah, you just leave it in here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry to disturb you.
No,
worries.
you're fine.
Thank you.
To
That point is, yes, let's refocus maybe this goal, because I think we understand with the archery and pole, we're just coming
mhm,
up with some of these things in the way that are roadblocks
Yeah.
to get there.
all right, so the next step should be, what you said, reach out to,
Mass historical.
Mass-
and-
Well, I would.
Other
Preservation-
stakeholders? Oh,
Preservation
yeah.
Mass, and see, there's gotta be other communities within the Commonwealth.
Mhm.
And Preservation Mass, I would think, no, but it would also give us the opportunity to introduce this commission. And maybe even, a welcome, hey. I was reading up about her, seems like she's got some good background.
So are we changing this from a sub-grant thing to?
yeah, I changed the goal to funding program and then just create a program for historic preservation. And then I'll send this out to everybody after, but then I'll reach out to Preservation Mass and other communities.
Okay, great. Let's go on to the next one.
And if people are good with that, I'm good with that. The next one we already talked about was the CPC. I just was gonna change this nothing's changed. It was presented and it will be on the warrant
Yeah.
I
would
just
change-
changed the date to,
But it's not the beach concession stand, so that's gonna be a whole different project.
Um,
I don't even know where
for-
that stands.
it's the Main Street, right?
Yeah,
Support historic preservation of Main Street. Okay,
yeah, because the beach, that's in the works at some point, but I have no idea where they stand right now with the consultant. I'm looking at the concession stands.
um,
And then this whole Winter Street cobblestone project, basically at the end of the day, the sewer force main project had 5 different add-ons. That were a joint request, more from the previous DPW director. But at the end of the day, Winter Street is a cobblestone street. All the cobblestones that are there are under the current asphalt, and the intention is to take out those cobblestones and put them back. But bring back the historic cobblestone streets. And the thought was that we could apply for CPC funds, however, I'm kind of leery on that one at the moment, so.
Okay.
Should
It would
we-
be a connection to the Main Street.
should we,
Yes.
should we?
I mean, I'm having difficulty right now, kind of, with the whole preservation functionality of it, so.
So is that just under the sewer main project? Like,
Yeah, I mean, that could be, that could be its own subcategory and goal of, we know that when they get to that point, they're gonna be reaching out to us. David Gray, the sewer director, obviously he knows, and he, has promised me to, keep us updated on where they are.
So I'm just,
Eventually they'll be getting to there.
so I'm gonna change this to the goal is super sewer force main and then support Winter Street cobblestone project.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm just gonna put that, like, I don't know what else we can do other than, David Gray will keep Holly informed.
Yeah, no, I would just leave it at that, and
Okay.
not even have it as a.
so it's important to the historical commission. But is there any other way that we can support that initiative, or is it just that we're cheerleaders, but is there anything that we can do? I mean,
Yeah, like, is it really a goal for us, I guess?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Not right now is it a goal, I would think it's more or less to be a cheerleader until, I don't know, maybe when they get to that point, they find something, I think it's important to at least have it on the list as a,
Something for us to be. keeping
potential,
in
yeah,
mind.
right. Because, another side note on Winter Street, so the CPC project that NPC and PIN did jointly with the preservation of, documenting Liberty Street, Winter Street was essentially for helping with the sewer force main, so they could actually document it, before they even get there, which, yeah, I mean, that I think is helpful. So I'm looking forward to Main Street.
I'll keep it on there. For the next one, are you guys going to apply for the Paul Bloom grant for the?
Yeah, that would be, if we do the Paul Brown, that would be for the concession stands for like.
Okay, so-
Jenny's Beach.
Okay, so that wouldn't be until December 2024 though, so I'm just gonna change that date.
Yeah. And that all depends on where the project stands, and I haven't heard
Okay.
anything in quite a while. Remember earlier this year, a few months ago, we had a joint Concom and HGC meeting on those potential projects to the Jenny's Beach. PB and Stearns, 1904 Beach Pavilion, and the 1960s. Children's Beach, both contributing towards the local and national district, both eligible for that type of stuff, but. Yeah, that was interesting. If you haven't watched it, I recommend. I felt bad for the consultants.
The governance, we had talked about scheduling that demo session sometime in Q1.
Yeah, correct me on that one was.
Well, just that we wanted to have that session with Jen Doherty, but I think we didn't think we'd be able to get it until spring.
Yeah. And I think, so back on that, she is well aware of our NAPC review. So I think that would be something that
Be after.
it would be after, and it might go hand in hand with some of the recommendations that they may come up with as far as education and that outreach and that.
Gotcha. Tax credit, when's the 5 Surfside letter gonna be due, do we know?
Yes, we do.
I was just gonna put that one. They,
I think she needs it by the end of January, I think is when it's due to MHC for the next round.
I think that's what Aaron said.
Yeah, I think it's by the end of January. So, I would say, the sooner, Angus, you could, get that draft sent to me, then I can, facilitate it to the rest of the commission and, get it maybe the first of the year.
Yep.
I would say that first week in January. I have an HTC meeting that.
Tuesday the second?
Potential, yeah, but we're not having one the week of Christmas, thank you. Sorry. So yes, so this goes back to the education one, sorry, I'm jumping in.
Yeah.
I'm excited because this whole building with Nantucket and I create a short video, this would be a twofer. It would be a fun project and it's also a priority for the commission. For education, I think it's good.
Yeah, it's a way for us to dip our toe into doing video with building with Nantucket in mind, with the focus on the solar, but then we can move into other realms, and it'll be nice to sort of have that as a point of departure.
The next one for education, so I just received this week emails from the National Park Service. The National Alliance of Preservation Commissions and the National Park Service are teaming up. And they're working with, you all remember Matthew Bronski, our preservation engineer friend who came to Nantucket a couple of years ago. His company, I can never remember how you pronounce that company's name, but they are doing webinars for free for CLGs. And I just received the first one before this meeting, so I will be sending that out. You all saw the other one that I sent the other day. So I guess I would say just for ongoing education, monitor your emails that come from me, from NAPC.
when is the one that's coming up?
Tomorrow? No, today, this afternoon, actually.
Oh, yeah, it's at 1 PM.
There is one this afternoon, and then there's one, that's coming up in January. So basically, my point is NAPC and the National Park Service are teamed up for CLGs, and, Matthew's company is creating these webinars. And if you sign up, again, they're free for CLG, so you'll be able to do this for free. Just like any of the NAPC, training, if they require, $15, email me and say, hey, Holly, what's the password to get in? So you can register, because they changed the passwords up. But again, that is another component, not only that's paid for by the fact that we're got this review, but the main part is because of our CLG status, and MHC wanted to give that to CLGs in Massachusetts with their additional funding. So we have a free year of subscription. You all as members also should be receiving emails directly from NAPC. If you haven't, I will, I probably have to send an email to make sure I have everybody's email set up. But again, education component, and which is available to everybody. So thank you for keeping that target there, Abby, because that's helpful for me to making sure that everybody is, both commissions are being notified of these training opportunities.
No problem. So, I'll just update with, I put the architecture one, but then the other one that is in January, I'll just make sure to add it.
The architecture one being the 20th century one that they just did?
Yes,
Yesterday.
yes, that was
good.
yesterday.
That was a good one. Watch tonight.
I'm assuming you haven't heard back from the,
No, and that's on my list to touch base with her. Haven't heard anything more from David.
and then we had talked about a historic structure disaster resiliency workshop, but I don't think we'll have one by the end of the year, so I might move this out to
But
January.
I think NHA. And UPenn are still obviously very interested in having something like that.
All right,
And then, of course, our ongoing. Collaboration.
What about the Egan Maritime and the shipwreck, and is there anything that's going on with that?
Yeah, I haven't heard much from,
Is it
Yeah.
David Robinson?
yeah, basically, so David Robinson is the state archaeologist for underwater. And he was working on not only the report from his visit here for that shipwreck, which I haven't seen. I have to touch base with him and or Carlisle from Eden Maritime. But also he had, he put in a application to CZM, I think it was. It was another state grant, yeah, I don't think there's no one. Anyway, and he had asked me for a letter of recommendation beginning of last year, and I was supposed to hear back this past June, July, and I haven't heard, so I have to send him an email as well, see where that goes, if he got anything.
All right, that's it. I will send this out to everybody with the minutes.
Perfect. Oh, and speaking of minutes, it's my goal, I have it, that I will have those posted.
Oh, and I think I still haven't watched the video for, I have to finish the September minutes, which I will also circulate, so that's my fault, guys. I have to go back. Other than that, that's it. I will send this out to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. If there aren't any other comments, we've kind of hit our 12 o'clock. Do I have a
We just
motion?
need to approve our minutes. from
Oh,
November.
where's the minutes? I wanted to, I have some edits that I want to do with those, but I've been slammed this past round, so I will present those at the next meeting.
Okay, the November minutes?
The November minutes, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And as far as the schedule goes, I just think it would be good to point out that we're just continuing the third Friday of every month for the 2024 schedule. No changes, same time. That works for everybody. I think it's good for consistency.
Yeah. Is that good for everyone?
Works for me.
Mhm.
All right, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Secondly.
All in favor? Maggie,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Ida,
Aye.
Abby,
Hi.
and I as well. Wait, did I get everyone? Good. All right, well, thank you guys. Happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
Yes, Jamie.
Bye.